The rise and fall of King Solomon. What if I told you that the wisest man who ever lived was also responsible for one of history's greatest downfalls? You're about to discover the extraordinary true story of a king who had everything and lost it all through his own choices. I am Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, and this is my story. A tale that will take you from the heights of unimaginable wisdom and wealth to the depths of betrayal and collapse. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why my name echoes through history as both a blessing and a warning. My story begins long before I ever felt the weight of a crown upon my head. Picture this. I was born into a world of absolute power and privilege, yet also into a legacy that would either make me or break me. I was royal blood, yes, but more importantly, I was the son of a man whose name thundered across the ancient world. My father was David, the shepherd boy who slew Goliath with nothing but a sling and unwavering faith. The warrior king who united the 12 tribes of Israel under one banner. The poet whose songs could calm the most troubled souls. The man after God's own heart, who brought the Ark of the Covenant dancing into Jerusalem with pure joy. But you know what? To me, he was simply ... dad. From my earliest memories, I felt the crushing weight of his shadow pressing down on me. Every story I heard, every lesson I learned, every expectation placed upon my young shoulders reminded me of one inescapable truth. I would never be David. How could I be? The man was a legend, walking among mortals. Yet here's the thing about growing up in the shadow of greatness. You either rise to meet it, or you're crushed beneath its weight. And I was determined not to be crushed. My father's story shaped everything I understood about leadership, about faith, about what it meant to be chosen by God. I knew every detail of how he faced that giant Philistine warrior with nothing but 5 smooth stones and absolute trust in the Almighty. I'd heard 1,000 times how he united our scattered tribes, how he captured Jerusalem and made it our eternal capital, how he danced with such wild abandon before the Lord that it scandalized the royal court. But beneath all that glory, there was pain, deep, complicated pain that few dared to speak about openly. You see, I was born to Bathsheba. Even now, decades later, that name still carries whispers and rumors. My mother's story was one of love, loss, and controversy that would follow our family for generations. The relationship between her and my father had begun in shadows, marked by tragedy and the death of their first child. Yet somehow, through all that darkness, I was destined for the throne. That's the thing about royal families, isn't it? We're built on glory, but we're also built on secrets. My father's house was one of tremendous greatness, but also of constant turmoil. His victories were always shadowed by moments of profound personal failure. And as a child, I learned that leadership carries both glory and consequences in equal measure. From the very beginning, I understood one crucial thing. I was chosen by my father, yes, but more importantly, chosen by God himself. I was being prepared for something far greater than myself. What I didn't know was that the path to that throne would be paved with betrayal and blood. As my father's strength began to fade with age, so did the unity within our house. That's when my half-brother Adonijah saw his opportunity. And honestly, I couldn't blame him for thinking the throne should be his. Adonijah was everything a king should be, at least on the surface. He was strong, handsome, charismatic, and most importantly, he was the eldest surviving son. In his mind, and in the minds of many others, the throne was already his by right. Why wouldn't it be? After all, he was the natural heir. So he did what ambitious princes do. He gathered his supporters, organized lavish feasts, and essentially crowned himself king in everything but name. The man had military leaders on his side, influential priests backing his claim, and the momentum of tradition flowing in his favor. It could have been the end of my story right there, the end of God's plan for me. But you know what they say? Man proposes, but God disposes. My mother Bathsheba had always been watchful, always wise in the ways of court politics. She saw the thread crystal clear, and she wasn't about to let her son's destiny slip away without a fight. While my father lay weak and dying in his bed, she approached him with the courage of a lioness, protecting her cub. She reminded him of the promise he'd made years earlier, the sacred oath that I, Solomon, would be king after him. And with the intervention of the prophet Nathan, who confirmed God's will in the matter, the truth finally prevailed. My father, though near death, still possessed the power to anoint a king. He called for me, his younger son, and in the presence of his most loyal followers, he declared that I would sit upon the throne of Israel. But securing the throne was only the beginning of my troubles. Adonijah's ambitions couldn't simply be ignored, and the whispers of rebellion grew louder with each passing day. My brother, in his pride and frustration, couldn't accept either God's will or our father's decision. Even after my coronation, he continued to conspire, seeking to undermine my authority at every turn. The royal court was thick with intrigue, with treachery lurking around every corner. And so I did what was necessary. Adonijah, my own flesh and blood, had to be dealt with. The kingdom demanded stability, and his challenge to my authority simply couldn't be allowed to fester and grow. You see, the crown has a price, and that price is often heartbreakingly high. The struggle for power isn't for the faint-hearted. And in those early days, I learned the brutal reality of kingship. Justice and survival often walk hand in hand, whether we like it or not. My father's final days were filled with quiet wisdom. His voice, once so commanding and authoritative, had softened with age and illness. But his words carried the weight of a lifetime's experience. I knelt beside his bed, knowing that soon he would be gone and everything would fall to me. The crown, the kingdom, the overwhelming responsibility of it all. Be strong, he told me, his eyes still sharp despite his frail body. Show yourself a man, walk in the ways of the Lord your God, and follow his statutes. These were his last instructions, his final plea. Notice what he didn't speak about. He didn't mention wealth or power or conquest. He spoke of righteousness. He reminded me that kingship was more than just sitting on a throne. It was a sacred covenant with the Almighty himself. A king, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, must be a servant to his people, a protector of justice, and above all, a man who walks humbly with his God. And then came the inevitable. David, the giant among men, the one after God's own heart, departed this world. In that moment, all of Israel wept, and the full weight of the kingdom fell completely upon my shoulders. Now I was king, but more than that, I was a son without a father. The days that followed weren't easy, I can tell you that much. The kingdom was vast, the people were numerous, and though I was young, I knew I had to prove myself quickly. There were still enemies within my own house that needed dealing with. Joab, my father's general, was a man of blood and ambition who remained a constant threat. Shema, who had cursed my father during his darkest hour, also rose against me. Justice demanded that these men be dealt with, and so they were. I learned early that mercy has its limits, that leadership sometimes requires impossibly difficult decisions. My father had built a great kingdom, but I would need to secure it with my own hand. You see, a throne is never truly safe until the last whisper of rebellion has been silenced. With my father's wisdom echoing in my heart, I fully embraced my role as king. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge was yet to come. The question wasn't whether I could rule, but whether I could rule with God's wisdom, David's justice, and the strength befitting a true king. Little did I know that the path ahead would demand more from me than I had ever imagined possible. In the stillness of the night, as I stood alone on the palace balcony overlooking the sprawling city of Jerusalem, I felt the crushing weight of the crown pressing down upon me. I was young, perhaps too young, and yet here I was, king of this vast nation, the son of the great David. But no amount of royal blood could silence the persistent fear gnawing at me from within. How could I, in my youth, possibly lead such a great people, a people chosen by God Himself? The responsibility was absolutely overwhelming, like a storm cloud hanging over my head, dark and heavy with the promise of challenges I wasn't sure I could weather. I felt unworthy, unprepared for the sheer magnitude of it all. This kingdom stretched far beyond what my eyes could see, and the decisions I would have to make seemed like towering mountains I lacked the strength to climb. That's when I knew I couldn't rely on my own wisdom alone. I needed something far greater than myself. So I went to Gibeon, the place where my father used to worship, and I offered sacrifices to the Lord. 1,000 burnt offerings I placed upon the altar. This wasn't about seeking glory or winning the favor of my people. This was between God and me. It was an act of complete surrender. In that moment, I wasn't Solomon the king. I was simply Solomon, a servant of the Almighty, desperately seeking guidance. My heart bowed humbly, searching for the face of the one who had established my father's kingdom. That night, as I slept, something extraordinary happened. The Lord appeared to me in a dream. His voice, oh, how can I possibly describe it? It was like thunder wrapped in perfect peace, a presence that filled my very soul with wonder and awe. He asked me a question that cut straight to the core of everything. What shall I give you? Think about that for a moment. Anything. He was offering me anything at all. Power, riches, long life, victory over my enemies. Everything was within my reach. But in that divine moment, none of those things seemed to matter. I knew exactly what I needed most. I spoke from my trembling heart with complete honesty. "O Lord my God," I said, "you have made me king in place of my father David, but I am only a small child. I don't know how to carry out my duties." My voice faltered as I admitted my inadequacies. How could I lead this people? this vast and numerous people, without the wisdom to do it properly. And so I did untask for wealth or power or long life or the death of my enemies. I asked for understanding. I asked for a wise heart to govern, to know how to discern between good and evil. Give your servant wisdom, I said, so that I may guide your people with righteousness. There was silence, then a sacred pause, as if all of heaven was waiting for God's response. Then his voice came again, filled with approval and grace. Because you have asked for this, he said, and not for long life or riches or the death of your enemies, but for wisdom to administer justice, I will grant your request. But he didn't stop there. Oh no, he went far beyond what I had dared to hope. I will give you a wise and understanding heart, such as no one has had before you, nor will anyone after you have. And I will also give you what you did not ask for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime no king will compare with you. My heart could barely contain the wonder of it all. I had asked for wisdom, and in his incredible goodness, God had granted me not only wisdom, but also wealth, honor, and long life. It was as if the very gates of heaven had opened, pouring out blessings I had never even imagined. My future changed in that single instant. And though I couldn't foresee everything that was to come, I knew that from that moment forward, my reign would be marked by the divine favor of God himself. It wasn't long before the first great test of my wisdom arrived. They brought before me two women, weeping and shouting. They stood in front of my throne, each clutching the same baby, both claiming to be its mother. The tension in the hall was absolutely palpable. Each woman told her story, and yet there was no way to know who was telling the truth. One child had already died in the night, and now both women were claiming the living baby. The court waited for my judgment, the eyes of my people upon me. But I remained calm. This was exactly what I had asked for: the wisdom to discern justice, the clarity to see beyond mere words and get to the truth. I rose from my throne and gave an order that shocked everyone present. Bring me a sword. The guards hesitated for a moment, but quickly obeyed. I could see the unease in their eyes, but I remained firm. Cut the living child in two, I declared, and give half to each woman. Gasps filled the hall. Surely no one could have expected such a decree. The air became thick with tension, and both women froze in horror. Then it happened. The true mother's love revealed itself. She cried out, "No, my lord. Give her the living baby. Don't kill him." Her heart couldn't bear to see her child harmed, even if it meant losing him forever. In that moment, the truth was revealed as clear as daylight. I smiled and spoke with certainty. Do not harm the child. Give the baby to the first woman. She is his mother. The court erupted in amazement and praise. My wisdom had cut through the deception, and justice was served. From that day forward, news of this judgment spread throughout the land. My people marveled at the wisdom God had granted me. They saw not just a king, but a man who had received understanding directly from heaven's throne itself. With wisdom, I governed. With justice, I ruled. But soon, an even greater calling awaited me. A task that would cement not only my reign, but also Israel's place in the world. It was time to build a house for the Lord, a temple like none had ever been seen before. My father David had carried a dream, a vision that burned in his heart throughout his entire life. He longed to build a house for the Lord, a place where God's presence would dwell among his people. But it wasn't meant for him to accomplish this. God had made it clear that David was a man of war, a man whose hands were stained with blood. It would fall to me, his son, to make this vision a reality. The task of building God's sacred dwelling place, a temple for the Almighty, was mine to complete. The weight of this responsibility wasn't just about constructing stone and cedar. This was the fulfillment of a promise, a sacred covenant between God and Israel. This temple wouldn't simply be a building. It would be the very heart of our nation, the dwelling place of the Most High. It would stand as a symbol of God's favor, a reminder that we, His chosen people, were set apart for His glory. I felt the urgency deep in my soul, the divine calling to finish what my father had begun. This would be more than just a monument. It would be the center of worship for generations to come. The place where sacrifices would rise like incense toward the heavens, where Israel would seek God. The moment had arrived. I would make Jerusalem not only the political capital of Israel, but also the spiritual heart of our entire nation. This temple would stand as a beacon, not just for my people, but for all the nations around us, declaring that the God of Israel dwells among us. But such a vision couldn't be built with dreams alone. It required resources, materials, skilled labor, and strategic alliances. The land of Israel, though rich in spirit, lacked many of the resources needed for such a massive project. Fortunately, God, in His wisdom, had already provided me with what I needed. Relationships forged not through warfare, but through diplomacy and mutual respect. I reached out to Hiram, the king of Tyre. He had been a friend to my father and now became a friend to me. Hiram's kingdom was blessed with the finest cedar in all the world, and he agreed to provide me with the timber necessary to build God's house. It was a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. In exchange, I gave Hiram grain and oil from our fertile lands. Together, we ensured that only the very best materials would be used to construct a house worthy of the Lord of hosts. But I needed more than just Lebanon cedar. I required skilled craftsmen from all corners of the world, stonemasons, builders, goldsmiths, the very best of the best to bring this vision to life. Day and night, thousands of workers toiled away, chiseling stone, carving timber, overlaying the temple walls with pure gold. The scale of the project was absolutely immense. 7 long years of grueling labor, meticulous planning, and careful execution. The gold alone seemed to flow like rivers, and the beauty of the temple began to take shape before our very eyes. It was adorned with precious stones, intricate carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and flowers. Every single detail was meticulously crafted to reflect the splendor of the one for whom it was built. The people of Israel marveled as they watched the walls rise higher and higher. The Holy of Holies was prepared, a place so sacred that only the high priest could enter, and only once a year at that. The cost was enormous, not just in wealth, but in the sheer magnitude of human effort required. Yet, this wasn't an ordinary building. This was the very dwelling place of God Himself. My heart filled with pride and wonder as I watched it take shape, knowing that this temple would stand as a testament to God as glory and Israel as greatness for countless generations to come. And then, finally, the day arrived. After 7 long years of labor, the temple was complete. Its walls gleamed under the sunlight, the gold reflecting heaven's own glory. The people of Israel gathered in their thousands to witness its dedication. This wasn't just any ordinary ceremony. This was the culmination of a dream, a moment that would mark our nation's history forever. The Ark of the Covenant, the very symbol of God's presence with His people, was carried with tremendous reverence into the Holy of Holies. The priests, dressed in spotless white, moved with solemn grace. And when the ark was placed in its sacred chamber, something miraculous happened. A cloud descended upon the temple, a cloud so dense, so overwhelming, that the priests couldn't remain standing to minister. The presence of the Lord filled the house in a way that none of us had ever experienced before. It was as if she came armed with riddles, questions, challenges, each one carefully designed to probe the boundaries of what I truly knew. Yet for every question she posed, I had an answer. For every puzzle, a solution. We spoke of matters of the heart, of politics, of philosophy and faith. And every time I spoke, her eyes widened in genuine admiration. She had come seeking wisdom, and she found it. Not in books or scrolls, but in the words that God Himself had given me. Days passed, and she marveled not only at my words, but also at the opulence of my palace, the organization of my kingdom, and the dedication of my servants. She could barely believe what she was seeing with her own eyes. The reports I heard in my own land, she told me, were true, but they didn't even tell half of the greatness I see before me. Your wisdom and wealth exceed everything I could have possibly imagined. Her words weren't just flattery. They were confirmation that Israel had reached heights previously unknown in human history. When the Queen of Sheba finally departed, she left with gifts, blessings, and a bond of respect between our two nations. Her visit wasn't just a moment of personal triumph. It was the pinnacle of Israel's international prestige. The world looked upon my reign with wonder, and my fame spread like wildfire across all lands. But my wealth wasn't limited to mere treasures and tributes. The greatness of my reign was evident in the works of my own hands, the buildings that rose from the earth, the projects that transformed the very landscape of Israel itself. After completing the temple, I focused on my own palace, a place of such beauty and magnitude that it took 13 years to complete. Beams of cedar, ivory, and gold filled the halls. I built gardens, terraces, and pools, creating an oasis in the heart of Jerusalem. The palace wasn't just a home for me. It was a symbol of Israel's dominance, a physical manifestation of the wealth and power we had achieved. The walls echoed with the voices of ambassadors from foreign lands, dignitaries who came seeking wisdom and trade, offering tributes in exchange for a glimpse into the mystery of Israel's success. But my influence didn't stop at Israel's borders. I built a fleet of ships, sending them to distant lands to bring back treasures that increased our wealth tenfold. My ships sailed the Mediterranean, down the Red Sea, and beyond, reaching places few had ever seen. They returned with gold, ivory, exotic animals, and spices. Every port they visited knew the name of Solomon, and every shore they touched felt the weight of Israel's power. The wise, the philosophers, the kings came from the ends of the earth to sit at my table. They marveled at the vastness of my knowledge, mathematics, science, poetry, the mysteries of the natural world. I spoke of the cedars of Lebanon and the hyssop that grows on the wall. I understood the ways of the wind, the movement of the stars, and the order of all living creatures. The wisdom God had granted me made me a beacon for the world, and in my presence, nations sought counsel and alliance. But even in the midst of this golden age, something deeper was stirring within my soul. The wealth, the power, the fame, it all began to blur together, to twist and shift, to eclipse the simple purity of the wisdom I had once sought with such humble desperation. At the height of my reign, I foolishly believed that my numerous marriages to foreign princesses were wise political moves. I sought peace with Egypt, Moab, Ammon, and Sidon, binding nations together through matrimony. But with each wife came whispers of foreign gods, and little by little, step by step, my heart began to turn away from the Lord. My wives longed to worship their own deities, So I allowed altars to be raised to Ashtoreth Molech and Chemosh right here in Israel. What began as small concessions quickly demanded more and more of my soul. The people who had once looked to me for guidance now watched me stumble, and many followed my misguided path. My heart, once wholly devoted to God, became stained with idolatry. I forgot the very covenant that had blessed my reign so abundantly. As these foreign altars multiplied throughout my kingdom, the anger of the Lord was kindled against me. A prophet delivered a painful message that cut straight to my heart. Because of my disobedience, my kingdom would be divided after my death. God, in His mercy, would spare this judgment while I lived, but my son would bear the consequences of my sins. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My legacy, the empire I had built, would fracture because of my own choices. I had become the architect of my own downfall, leading my people away from the very one who had blessed us beyond measure. After a glorious reign of 40 years, I, Solomon, met my end. I left behind a kingdom that was crumbling from within, weakened by the very prosperity that had once defined it. My son Rehoboam inherited not just a throne, but a legacy riddled with challenges and division. Ignoring the wisdom I had once cherished above all else, he imposed harsh burdens upon the people, which led to outright rebellion. 10 tribes broke away, forming the northern kingdom of Israel, while only Judah remained loyal to our house. My empire, once magnificently united, was now fractured and divided. The seeds of my own failures had grown into a bitter harvest that would plague our people for generations. My legacy stands as a stark reminder that wisdom without humility leads to arrogance, and power without righteousness sows destruction. I am Solomon, and this was my story. Now, as you write your own story, consider carefully what you choose to leave behind. Will you learn from my triumphs and, more importantly, from my failures? The choice, as always, is yours. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories from history. Keep your mind open to the lessons of the past, and until we meet again, choose wisdom over wealth, humility over pride, and faithfulness over fleeting pleasures. Your story is still being written. Make it count. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!